Are you addicted to grief? Today I'm going to talk about 10 signs that might indicate that you are. Hi Wood Fam, this is Leo with One Happy Widow. Today we're going to talk about signs to know if you might be addicted to grief. There's a couple different terms for it. Some people call it complicated grief. Addicted to grief is not really a medical term or an official term. It's more of a saying that we use. Obviously, from the words, you probably know what it means. But I've seen a few people that are on my personal Facebook friends, and I've noticed one in particular. She's widowed. She's been widowed for 2 years, and every single post that she makes, and she makes multiple posts a day, it's constantly posting about how much she loves and misses her husband. And it really makes me feel sad for her, because I feel like that she is stuck in that valley of grief, as I like to call it. And it makes me wonder how can I go about helping her or people in the same type of situation as her. So let's talk about the 10 signs that you might be addicted to grief. Think about this for yourself, or if you know other people who are widowed, to see if you might see those signs in others and recognize them, and maybe recognize them in yourself as well. And then at the end, we'll talk about a few things that you can do to help yourself. The first step is recognizing that you are addicted to grief, or that you are stuck in grief, or that you are in complicated grief. Okay, so the first sign is a persistent focus on the loss. So if you are constantly thinking about your husband, is that every thought in your mind? Is that the first thought in your mind? When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you think about, the last thing you think about before you go to bed, and throughout the day, if every thought that you have just about revolves around your spouse, that may be persistent focus on loss. Now, remember that some of these signs are going to be completely normal in the beginning of fresh grief, right? And so if you are in, say, I don't really like to put strict timelines, but I mean, I'll give you some guidelines of what I've seen in others and for myself. But I would say if you're in that first 6 months to maybe a year of grief, these signs might not apply to you, because that first year is like a roller coaster of all kinds of different things that we go through, from fresh grief, dealing with a lot of legal stuff, dealing with a lot of personal stuff, a lot of secondary grief that comes along with losing our spouse, like our lives are turned upside down. And so obviously the first thing in your mind at that point is going to be about the loss of your spouse and how it has affected your life. But what I'm talking about is more like your spouse has been gone for over a year or 2 years or 3 years or more, and you still seem to be, your actions and thoughts indicate that you're freshly widowed, as in the first few months or 6 months. Like if somebody talked to you and they didn't know how long you'd been widowed, and they asked you and you said 6 years, and they were like in their mind thinking, ooh, I was thinking more like 3 months. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So these are signs of that would not match up with the timeline of grief that you're in. And I know we always say, oh, everything in your own time, you grieve in your own time. There's no timeline, there's no right, and there's no wrong. There's not really, but at the same time, if you are stuck in grief and it's been several years, or if you're addicted to grief and you see all 10 of these signs, or 8 out of 10 of these signs, or something like that, it's not that you're grieving wrong. It's just maybe you're not healing on a timeline that is healthy for most people. And so, like I said, I'm not a therapist or a doctor, so I'm not trying to give medical advice. I'm just trying to say that it might be time, if you see a lot of these signs and recognize them in yourself, it might be time to seek out some resources to help you move along in the grief process. So even though there's not a right or wrong timeline for traveling through the grief process, you still got to be traveling. So if you are not traveling, if you're just standing still in the grief timeline, after a while, you need to find ways to pull yourself along through that journey again. So some people travel faster, some people travel slower, but you still got to be traveling, if that makes sense. So on to number 2. The second sign that you might be addicted to grief is the inability to enjoy life. You are not able to find pleasure in any of the activities that you used to. Maybe it's because it's things that you used to do with your husband, and so now it's just too sad to think about doing things alone. Or you might feel guilty for moving forward and doing things that make you happy or that used to make you happy, or doing things that would bring you joy because you feel guilty because your husband's not along or your wife is not alongside of you to enjoy those things with you. And so there's a lot of guilt that is applied or that comes along with whenever we go through different phases of grief. As we move forward and try to heal and move towards hope and acceptance, it always comes along with a side item of grief, because it's really hard to move away from our spouse, because as we're moving towards healing, we're also moving farther away from the initial loss of them. So on to number 3. Number 3 would be isolation. So have you withdrawn from your friends and family? Do you decline social invitations or social activities? Do you prefer to be alone so that you can just kind of sit around and think about your spouse and how much you miss them? Do you have trouble finding meaning even in what's the point of going out and socializing? My husband's not out there at that party, so I don't want to talk to anybody else, kind of thing. Might even bring pain or emotional pain to you. So if grief has become your best friend or your constant companion, and you always seem to be, turning down invitations to social situations, or at some point it's been so long people keep inviting you places, and you decline so much that they just don't even invite you anymore because they think, well, don't bother inviting her because she'll always say no. If you've gotten to that point, then maybe you're isolating yourself too much. And I know that COVID kind of had a lot to do with that, but now that we're 4 to 5 years out, and if you're several years out from being widowed, then it might be time to think about how can you move forward and put yourself back into some social situations. Even though they might seem uncomfortable at first, it could be something that's healthy for you. So number 4 is repetitive narratives. So what that means is that it's like your thoughts are on a loop, right? So maybe your spouse died in a very abrupt or violent way. And maybe you were there, maybe you witnessed it, maybe it took you by surprise. You might be dealing with some PTSD or the inability to get the thoughts of what happened out of your mind, and not able to really think about much else. It's like the thoughts are on repeat in your head, and they just keep looping around, and you might be saying the same things over and over again. You might be responding in the same way to people who try to speak to you over and over again. And so it's like your mind is stuck on a loop and it cannot seem to move forward. Kind of like they say, a broken record. It gets stuck on that one little line and just keeps saying it over and over again. So number 5 would be neglecting your personal needs. So maybe not taking care of yourself, whether it be you're not getting up and getting in the shower, you're not getting dressed, you're walking around in your pajamas all the time. Maybe you're not brushing your teeth on a regular basis like you should. Maybe you're not eating right. Maybe you're eating too much. Maybe you're not eating enough. Maybe you're not getting any exercise. Maybe you're not going outside, getting any sun on your face. You're not touching any grass. You're not talking to any people. Maybe you're not working. All of the things that make us human, that put us into the middle of society and make us a member of society, and you're just not really taking care of yourself because maybe you think, well, what's the point? Maybe you think, well, I don't have the desire, and why would I need to take care of myself? Who do I even need to look nice for? Because my husband's not here to appreciate me getting all dressed up or something like that. And so neglecting your personal needs. And also, if you're neglecting your personal needs, eventually you're going to be neglecting your health. And so as you neglect your health, that makes you less able to handle the grief that you're in. And so it makes you more vulnerable to being stuck even longer in that loop, in that valley of grief, as I call it. All right. Number 6 is your sense of identity is tied to your grief. So if basically your first thought of when you describe yourself is that you're a widow, because that has become your identity, it is your identity, or it's part of your identity. And when you're in fresh grief in that first 6 to 12 months, let's say, being a widow is the first thing on your mind all the time, because you're trying to figure out who you are now, and you're trying to change that. You're trying to change that identity from widow to yourself, a person, maybe a single person, or maybe a widowed person, or however you refer to yourself. But, you're trying to live this, what they call new normal. I hate that phrase, but that really is about as appropriate as it can get. And so if your sense of identity is tied to your grief, like you almost wear it as a badge of honor, like that's the first thing you talk about when it's in conversation, when you do talk to people, then, and if you think about, well, aside from being a widow, if you can't really think of what your purpose is in life aside from that, then it could be that your sense of identity is tied too much in with your grief. So number 7 is a fear of letting go. And again, I've made a few videos about that. I will post one above. I'll post a link to one of them above about how it's so hard to move forward and look backward at the same time. Because as you're moving forward and healing for yourself, the farther you move forward, the farther you're moving away from the memories of your lost spouse. And so that's a really difficult transition to make, because it's filled with a lot of grief. And so that fear of letting go, that might be what's holding you back from moving forward and finding peace, finding hope, finding happiness, and allowing yourself to have those freedoms. And maybe you feel like staying in that grief all the time is the way that you stay connected to your spouse. And so you feel like if you let go of that grief and you let go of that sadness, it's like you're letting go of your spouse, or you're letting go of their memory. And that's not really what's happening, but you might feel that it is. And that sense of guilt from that might be what's causing you to kind of stay stuck in that place. So number 8 kind of goes along with number 7, and that's resistance to healing. All right. So that's, people might be reaching out to you and saying, hey, can I help you in any way? I'm here for you. Maybe you need to seek some counseling. Maybe you've refused to go see counseling because you're thinking, well, what can they do to help me? You haven't gone to the doctor because you think, well, what can the doctor do to help me? You haven't been to, you haven't considered medication. Medication's not great for everybody. I'm not pushing medication on anybody. I'm just saying some people do find that medications for different reasons can help them at different stages of their grief. And so it might be something that you consider as an option when you talk to your doctor. And so just that resistance to even allowing yourself the ability to feel happiness. Like you're not allowing yourself to watch movies that might make you laugh, because if you laugh, you feel guilty. Like, how dare I smile and laugh and feel, laugh at a joke or something funny, or feel happy about anything while my husband's dead and I should be sitting here grieving him all the time, 24/7. Number 9 is ongoing emotional turmoil. So experience the same intensity of emotions that you felt in the very beginning. So in the very beginning, when you become widowed, and in a case like me, if your spouse was diagnosed with a terminal illness and so you kind of knew it was coming even before they died, for me, that emotional turmoil started at the diagnosis, not necessarily at the time of death. But whenever it is that you find out that information that your spouse is dead or going to die or actively dying or any of those kind of things, at that moment, the grief and the sadness and the denial and all those things are fresh. And as time goes by, we say it doesn't really get any easier. You just get stronger. You just get more able to handle it. But if you're finding that it's been 2 years or 3 years or however long it is, and you really feel just as sad now, like your grief is just as raw and it's just as painful and it's just as acute as it was in the very beginning when you first became widowed. If you're crying every single day, hours upon hours, every single night, you go to sleep crying, you wake up crying, and you are feeling like the same way you felt as if he had just died yesterday, That's ongoing emotional turmoil. And so over time, those feelings should start to fade a little bit. They're not going to go away, but they integrate themselves into our lives and become a part of the scenery, but maybe not the main subject of the painting, if that makes sense. Okay, if you're painting and you have a tree in the foreground and you got some clouds in the background, if the tree is your grief, at some point the tree should be part of the background, and then there are other things that need to be the main focus of your painting, if you want to call it that. And so if you don't feel like that you're feeling any better now than you were in the very beginning, and it's been a while, you may be experiencing ongoing emotional turmoil. And the 10th sign that we will talk about are intrusive thoughts or dreams. That's kind of the same as your repetitive narrative. So it's your thoughts are recurring. Like, again, they're sort of on a loop. And so you have those distressful thoughts. You have those thoughts all the time about the loss of your spouse. You feel like you can't escape those thoughts, like you can't stop thinking about them, or you're having dreams about it every night and you feel like you don't even want to go to sleep anymore because you can't stop seeing the things that you're seeing, or you can't stop thinking about maybe the trauma of finding your spouse when on the day that they died, or finding or the phone call that you got when you found out that your husband had died. Those thoughts, if they are basically right here in the front of your mind all the time, and you can't stop thinking about them, and you can't even move forward because you can't replace those thoughts with other things because they're so strong and they're so prominent all the time, that's intrusive thoughts or dreams. If you've ever met a person with OCD, and I'm not talking about neat freak OCD, that's a little bit different, but I'm talking about OCD in their brain, and they honestly have intrusive thoughts. I had a student once that had OCD in that way, and he would ask a question like, do we have homework tonight? And I would tell him, no, we don't have homework. And he would ask the same question 12 or 13 times. And it was just a yes or no question, but he could not accept the answer because he still needed to hear it. And so he would say, do we have homework tonight? No, we don't have any homework. So are you sure we don't have homework tonight? No, we don't have any homework. Okay, so what about these questions that are listed on the side of the notes? Are those homework? No, those are not homework. You don't have to worry about answering them. Okay, so if I don't answer these questions and I come back tomorrow and the questions are not answered, will I get a 0 on my homework? No, you will not get a 0 on your homework. You don't have to answer the questions. So you see how they would go over and over? He kind of would rephrase them, but it was like he could not accept my original answer, and his mind would not stop wanting the reassurance. And even when I gave him the reassurance, it was like it wasn't enough, like he didn't believe me, or his brain would be, you know how people think, did I turn off the stove? And they think, I know I turned off the stove. I remember turning off the stove, but did I? Or what is that? Was that yesterday? So you see how that, the thought just keeps coming back until they have to finally just check the stove. And then they walk away and they're like, but what, did I check all four of them? And they go back. Yes. Okay. They're all off. So it's kind of like that, but with grief. Okay. And I know that you've probably either know someone like that or you've experienced some thoughts like that. So those are the 10 signs that you may be addicted to grief. Again, this is not a diagnosis, okay? This is not an official anything. This is just, if you have thought about all 10 of these and you're like, yep, I'm doing that. Yep, I'm doing that. And you find that you are, you're agreeing with, or you're recognizing a good portion of these 10 on the list, then it could be time to seek some other resources. And just to find out if there's anything more that you could be doing to help yourself stay moving along this path of the grief process. So some things that may help, first of all, you need to be journaling, okay? And so the reason why I say that is because you may think that you are stuck in this grief process and that you haven't moved forward, and you may be real frustrated because you think, I'm not getting anywhere in this grief journey. Like I'm not moving forward. I'm not making progress. So why am I stuck here? But if you were to journal and you were to go back and pick up your journal and read a journal entry from 6 months ago or a year ago, you might find that you actually are moving forward. It's just that you're moving forward so slowly every day that you don't recognize your growth yet. If you wake up in the morning and you look at your hair, like I've been trying to grow my hair out for 4 months, and I look in the mirror every day and I'm like, it's still, I just got a haircut today because I'm trying to, grow it out and like level it out. So I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, I've been growing my hair out for 4 months. Why is it still in this pixie cut? But if I were to look at pictures of myself from 4 months ago, I would realize that my hair is actually growing. It's just, I don't see it because every day I get up in the mirror and I look at it and I'm like, yep, still short. Yep, still short. Yep, still short. Same thing with your nails. Same thing with weight loss. Things that happen really slowly and you don't see it every day. You have to give yourself a wider range of time to see if there's been any improvement. You have to look at your weight from a month ago, not from yesterday. You have to look at like I said, your hair growth from a picture from 3 months ago. Those types of things. So the only way that you can get a snapshot of where you are in your grief is if you read a journal of your thoughts and feelings that you have recorded down on paper or in a video so that you can see where you were mentally and to see if anything has gotten better, if you've gotten stronger, if you feel any different, if you see any changes, or if you feel any improvements. So the best way to do that is to journal. I have some journal templates that I can give you for free. They are PDF that you can download and you can print them out and you can write on them. All you have to do is go to www.onehappywidow.com/journal, and you can download those templates there, and then you can print them out and write on them. If you don't want to do that, just take out a piece of paper or a notebook, a spiral notebook, a bullet journal, whatever you want to do, and make sure you put the date on there and just write. Okay. If you need some journal prompts, you can get those by going to the same website and putting in your email address. And when you download those journal templates, it will also give you an offer for some journal templates some journal prompts so that it will give you some ideas of what you want to write about. Okay. So that's one of the best ways that you can, just to give you an idea to see if you're moving forward, if you're actually stuck. And some other things that you can do is get some resources. Go out and seek resources. If you want some group grief, a group, I don't want to say counseling. It's not really counseling, but anyway, Grief Share. I've talked about this in several of my videos, but Grief Share is a small group coaching session, and it's run through churches, and it's usually free, if not really cheap, $5 to $10 maybe to cover the cost of the workbook. And it's a 12 to 13 week. You just meet once a week for 12 or 13 weeks, and it's the same group. And you go through. Now, it's not just for widows, but it is for people who have lost a family member to death. So sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's siblings, sometimes it's spouse, sometimes it's children. But it's just people going through grief. And so I've gone through a few sessions myself, and it was helpful. And a lot of people have said it was very helpful for them to go through, especially since it's not very expensive to do. You might find that going to a therapist and talking out your feelings might help you. You might find that going to a psychiatrist or a doctor and talking about medication options might be beneficial to you. Again, I'm not a doctor, but your doctor would know what options are available to you and if they feel like it would be beneficial to you. A lot of times you work together with a therapist and a doctor or psychiatrist at the same time so that you can do your talk therapy through your therapist, and then you can take your medication through your doctor. And medication is not meant to be a lifelong journey, and taking medication doesn't mean that you've given up, or doesn't mean that you're weak or that you can't handle things on your own. Okay. It just means that there are medications out there that could or might help some people with their grief. My daughter went through this when she was a teenager. The one who was 15 when her dad died. I read her diary entry a few weeks ago on my last video, and it was very moving. And it was a journal entry or a diary entry that she wrote. And I remember her going on many different medications. And I'm not normally the parent that likes to shove medication down her kid's throat, but she kept trying different medications because she was in a grief rut and she couldn't seem to get out of it. And she finally kept talking to her doctor about it, and they kept increasing her meds and adding other things. And she finally found a combination of medications that worked for her, but they were pretty strong. And it was several, 2 or 3 different ones added together, and they kept increasing the dosage and adding them together. She finally found a combination of medications that worked. Now, what it did was she was having those intrusive thoughts. She was having that inability to move forward because the thoughts of losing her dad was taking over her mind all the time. And she couldn't feel any joy because she was overcome with grief. So what the medicine essentially did, like I said, I'm not a doctor, but this is how she explained it to me, was that it just numbed her. Like, it just made it to where the sadness was just, she couldn't feel it anymore. I don't want to say it turned her into a zombie, but it just kind of, like, it gave her brain and her heart a break from the grief for a while. And that's what she needed, but not forever. She didn't want to be numb and non-feeling forever, but she just wanted to stop feeling the pain for a while. She was even having, dark thoughts of doing things to herself that she shouldn't have been having, but she could not help it. And she couldn't escape, that roller coaster, that loop of those feelings and those thoughts and everything. She just needed a break, and she didn't know how to stop it. So the medicine, she finally got a strong enough medicine to where it stopped her from having those feelings. And so she was on that dosage and that combination for several months. And then finally, after she stopped feeling for a while, she noticed that not only did she not feel sad, but she also couldn't feel happy. And at the time, it was like, look, forget about feeling happy. I don't care about feeling happy. I need to stop feeling sad. Like, I need to stop hurting, because I can't even think about happy, much less normal, So she just needed to stop feeling sad before she could even consider trying to make herself feel happy. So after several months, she was like, okay, I'm ready to start feeling some joy, some happiness, some hope. I want to laugh. And she couldn't, because the medicine suppressed basically all of her feelings. And so then she talked to her doctor about slowly coming off those medications. And so she did. She weaned herself off those medications slowly and over time under her doctor's care. And now she doesn't take any of those medications anymore. And she's living a happy and hopeful life. She's successful. She's got a job. She's in school. She's living on her own with her brother. And, she's as happy, I think, as she's been since her dad died. But it was a long road and a long process. And part of that healing process involved medication. And it was not forever for her. And so I'm just saying, it's not for everybody, and I'm not trying to push it. But I am trying to say that I do think for some people it can benefit them on this grief journey to kind of help them bridge some gaps between where they are and where they need to be. So that's an option for you. I also am going to have some coaching sessions that I'm going to open up as soon as my new job levels out a little bit. But I'm going to start with some small group coaching. It's going to be probably no more than 4 people per session, and it'll be weekly coaching sessions. And it's basically just so that widows can get together and talk about their feelings and their experiences and bounce ideas off of each other. And I can help moderate those things and just form a connection with people who have gone through similar trauma. So I'm hoping that in September-ish, I'll be able to start those sessions. So be on the lookout for that. And so that's another resource that could help you. I've considered doing some one-on-one down the road. I'm not ready for that yet because of my schedule, but that may be something that's also down the road, and some other resources as well. There's books out there. There is individual therapy out there. There's Facebook groups out there. There's videos out there on YouTube, mine and others. And so there's lots and lots of resources out there, but you got to go out there and find them. Okay. Start looking for them. If you need help and you can't find any resources and you're like, I think I need this, this, and this, then you can always contact me through email and just tell me what it is that you feel like you might need. And I can at least help point you in the right direction and try to help you find some resources that might help you. Okay. So that's all we're going to talk about today is, are you addicted to grief? First thing to do is recognize it. And if you feel like you are, then it's time to take some steps to seek some more resources to find out if you can figure out how to get moving along on this grief process again. All right. Okay. That's going to be it. Until next time, We will see you later. Bye.